Police had already showed up and they were breaking down the window into this building here.
2 suspects arrived on scene, demands were made, and people were shot.
Emergency task force officers flood a North York business complex after 2 people are shot during a robbery. Officers say the moving company where it happened was targeted. The 2 victims are both being treated for their injuries tonight. Lauren Pelly has been at the scene near Dufferin and Steeles all day. And Lauren, a huge police response to this robbery. Even the chief came to the scene.
Yes, and you can still see there are police on scene outside this complex tonight. We were told that 2 suspects burst in wearing masks and made demands inside the moving company in that building, creating a morning of terror for workers there. Now, we're also told that police have been on scene looking for evidence all day long, trying to find out who these suspects were.
The police had already showed up and they were breaking down the window into this building here. After they broke down the window, they came in and they came out with 2 of my colleagues.
This worker at a quiet commercial complex in North York says the area became a massive crime scene.
They weren't injured by a gunshot. They were shaken up and disturbed, and minor injuries from diving out of the way of the shooter.
Police say a pair of suspects entered the offices of this moving company, made some kind of demands, then opened fire. A man and woman were shot and taken to hospital, while a 3rd person suffered an anxiety attack after watching the shooting unfold.
2 men came into the building wearing masks, and one went one way, one went another.
We came out and there was a bunch of fire departments and police, ETF, and K9 units came, kind of descended on the place.
The brief chaos unfolded around 10:30 this morning on Magnetic Drive near Dufferin and Steeles. Heavily armed officers remained on scene throughout the day. An unusually heavy police presence sparked by early reports of an active shooter. But Chief Mark Saunders says the suspects likely fled on foot.
We don't fully understand what this case is about at this point in time.
While the motive isn't yet clear, police believe it was a targeted robbery. One employee did tell us the moving company sometimes keeps a fair amount of cash on hand to pay temp workers.
It is a solvable case in the sense that we've been able to respond immediately, lots of resources, lots of cooperation, and it's very solvable.
Now, it's hard to see in the dark behind me there, but you can see the Forensic Identification Services van is among the last police cars still on this scene. As I said, they're looking for evidence, trying to identify these 2 suspects they believe fled on foot. Right now, there aren't any suspect descriptions, but police are asking anyone who has dash cam footage or surveillance video to get in touch. Dwight?
Thank you, Lauren. A city is in mourning as America struggles to cope with yet another school shooting. This time, Santa Clarita, California, near Los Angeles. A 16-year-old shot and killed 3 students and wounded 2 others. He also shot himself and is now in critical condition. Kim Brunhuber now with the latest.
Minutes after parents dropped their kids off at this school, they got the news that every parent in America dreads that there's an active shooter in the school. So students here were forced to shelter in place, some of them for up to an hour in their classrooms while police searched. They say they found 6 gunshot victims inside. They were transported to hospital, and it turns out one of the people who was transported to hospital was the shooter himself, a 16-year-old boy, a student at this school, and today is his birthday. Police say they found a .45 caliber handgun. It had no more bullets. Police say that he used the last round on himself. Police say there are no further suspects.
The school was locked down. They did partial evacuation. We also sheltered in place a portion of the school until we established who was responsible for this tragic shooting.
The suspect was later identified as one of the victims who was found in the quad. He is identified as a 16-year-old male whose birthday is today.
Now, interestingly, students here at this school went through a live shooter drill just a couple of weeks ago, but of course, nothing would prepare them for the terror of hearing those pops and knowing that it was the real thing.
And people were tripping and falling. I was trying to help them up. It was absolutely terrifying. I can't even comprehend it. It doesn't make sense to me how this could happen here.
So now, Santa Clarita, the latest American community, because of gun violence, to have to come together and rally and grapple with questions that just can't be answered. In the word of one student here, what kind of world is this? Kim Brunhuber, CBC News, Santa Clarita.
3 former St. Mike's students could be looking at time in jail for their role in 2 sexual assaults at St. Michael's College School last year. At a sentencing hearing today, the Crown is suggesting the boys serve between 10 to 15 months. Mike Wise is following this for us and joins us now. Mike.
Dwight, these 3 students pleaded guilty to sexual assault with a weapon and assault with a weapon at the school. These were for incidents involving 2 different boys. The Crown said one of the boys couldn't bring himself to provide a victim impact statement today because it would force him to relive the experience. Now, these incidents took place last fall. In one of the cases, 3 boys on the school's football team ripped the pants off of a teammate in the locker room and inserted a broom handle in his anus. Now, a few weeks later, there was another similar case of sexual assault with a broom, this one captured on video and shared on social media. And the parents of that boy provided a victim impact statement saying, "It is one thing to be violently assaulted, penetrated, and humiliated and helpless to protect yourself from that violence. But it's a whole other thing to know it is being recorded so that other people can see your humiliation and the thing that happened to you after it's over, so that it is never really over." Now, lawyers for the boys who pleaded guilty are arguing that they shouldn't be held in custody, saying they are all remorseful and ashamed that they received death threats on social media and that say, as young offenders, they were immature at the time of these assaults. Now, they will learn their sentences in about 5 weeks. Now, there are 3 other students facing charges in this case. 2 of them, for them, the case has concluded, but the outcome hasn't been released by the Crown yet. Another teen is set to go to trial next March. Dwight?
Thank you, Mike. In less than 2 weeks, elementary teachers across the province will begin a Work to Rule campaign. The union representing thousands of teachers saying the province left it no choice. Lorenda Redekop now with more on how it will impact our schools.
The Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario says come November 26th, its members will work to rule.
This is not about affecting students. It will have no effect on students' learning conditions or their safety in any way.
The union has 83,000 members. It says an overwhelming 98% voted in favor of job action. ETFO has come up with a long list of what teachers won't do in what it calls Phase 1 of Work to Rule. It says all the items are administrative duties. Included in that list, they will not complete report cards, though teachers will provide a list of marks. Participate in EQAO-related activities, the standardized tests. Participate in any school board or Ministry of Education professional learning outside the school day. The union had this message to the Education Minister.
Come to our table, make a commitment to full-day kindergarten. Come to our table and reinvest that $90 million for students with special needs and who are at risk. That will start this that will kickstart this process, and we can move forward.
But Minister Stephen Lecce says this is about money.
They want 2% in compensation and benefits and salary. That across the system is $1.5 billion. We just don't think that that is a priority of families.
He compared this to the 1% a year wage increase educational support staff with CUPE agreed to. And he argues kids will be affected by the job action.
Not providing report cards and updated assessments, performance assessments of the status of your child doesn't hurt anyone but children in Ontario.
Parents we talked to back the teachers.
Unfortunate action that didn't need to take, but they have to take it, so I support the teachers.
I think the teachers need to be recognised. They do hard work.
Ontario's secondary school teachers are also without a contract and close to being in a legal strike position. Their union president tells me they'll be holding a news conference tomorrow to discuss next steps. Lorenda Redekop, CBC News, Toronto.
How often do you check the charges on your Presto card, even if you have a monthly pass? 2 Toronto residents are cautioning transit users to review their balances often after they were erroneously charged for a fare in a different city. Metrolinx is calling it unusual and says it could be related to a GPS tracking issue. But as Farah Morelli tells us, it's unclear how often this actually happens.
I tapped at Wilson Station.
Traveling more than 20 kilometers is unthinkable to do in 6 minutes on GTA roads.
So we take the bus from here, just around the corner.
But according to Samson Solomon and Ashley Howard's Presto records, that's exactly what they did on transit.
We were somehow from Wilson Station to Westwood Loop, which is in like deep Mississauga.
Their transaction records show they tapped at Wilson Station just after 8 p.m. on their way home back in August. But minutes later, we're on a bus on Mississauga's MyWay Transit.
It's next to impossible to be at Wilson Station and then like 6 minutes later be somewhere like north of the airport.
When they called Presto to complain, they were told they need to investigate further.
I'm here at Wilson Station. This is where Ashley and Samson tapped their cards at 8:06 p.m. that day. Now, according to Presto, their cards were tapped again 6 minutes later at the Westwood Mall bus loop. We're going to see how long it takes to actually get there.
We drove straight there, taking the fastest route on the 401. We didn't make any stops along the way and didn't hit any major traffic.
So we just got to the Westwood Mall bus loop from Wilson Station. Time check is 23 minutes, 11 seconds. The weather isn't so great, but even if you shave off 5-10 minutes, 6 minutes is a bit of a stretch.
After CBC Toronto contacted Metrolinx, Howard and Solomon's charges were reversed. But it insists this is unusual.
I've been here at Metrolinx a long time, and that isn't a complaint I hear very often or ever.
The problem could be related to the GPS embedded on the card readers.
In a moving vehicle, like the old streetcars, for example, or the new streetcars or buses, it can be a challenge because it's a moving vehicle.
There are always going to be rogue GPS readings on vehicles.
This transit advocate says GPS errors have been happening for a while. But as Metrolinx pushes to integrate Presto with other transit systems, it could get more problematic.
It's going to be very important that people get charged correctly for where they tap to use their card. If you've got jurisdictional issues where a York Region rider gets charged for being in Toronto or vice versa, this could proliferate.
Though Metrolinx says they aren't seeing more complaints like this, Solomon and Howard have this advice to Presto users.
Be careful, double check everything.
Farah Morelli, CBC News, Toronto.
It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas. I'm Greg Ross. Decorations and lights are going up around the city. We've even got snow this year, and the Christmas market is officially open for business. We'll have details coming up.
Longer library hours, new rec programs, and TTC discounts could soon be on the way. The idea is a part of the city's poverty reduction plan. The updated strategy clearing its first hurdle at City Hall today. Nick Bover explains.
This is a bit of food for the youth when they come in. Most times they come in, they are hungry.
In a space no bigger than a small shop, the Jane Finch Community and Family Center punches above its weight.
We have a lot of needs, lot of needs. I'm so very busy.
Aboso Bizamoan helps run the food bank here, along with after-school drop-in, tutoring, and employment help. The place can barely manage to get it done. As you said, it's not a huge space. You'd like a little more room to do what you're
a little more. We need more funding.
At City Hall, there's a signal that more help could be on the way. Earlier today, Toronto's Executive Committee approved a new phase of its poverty reduction strategy.
As many areas of our city prosper and thrive, we have to work to help address the needs of those who find themselves quite far away from that increased prosperity.
The plan calls for better access to rec programs, longer library hours, and the creation of new affordable housing. Expanded TTC discounts are also on the table.
People who are living on low income really rely on the TTC to get around for everything.
People who work with those residents say lower fares are needed, and soon.
Seems like a big ask, but I think we're moving closer and closer to understanding that affordable TTC is like critical for the health of the City of Toronto.
John Tory says the updated plan is a good one, but the provincial and federal governments will need to chip in.
These are areas that are not under the city's control alone.
But the report says that funding changes by the Ford government could have significant consequences on the plan. Back at Jane and Finch, community workers say any investment will not be wasted.
I guess just essentially expanding on staff to be able to have that capacity to service the amount of people that we're getting into our programs.
And all those things will require a little more funding.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Nick Boisvert, CBC News, Toronto.
At a time when the city of Toronto says the demand for emergency shelter beds is unprecedented, this new shelter is getting ready to open its doors. I'm Angelina King on Runnymede near St. Clair. Coming up, I'll give you a tour and break down some numbers when it comes to homelessness in Toronto.
Colette, you did promise a warm-up, and it feels like we're thawing out a bit.
Yeah, thawing out a little bit. It's kind of funny, and of course, it's all relative when you start to be really grateful to see the temperatures near the freezing mark when a seasonal high this time of year should be closer to about 7 degrees. In fact, just a little bit over. But hey, I think a lot of us are happy just to see those zeros and no negative in front of some of these numbers, although you do have them for Kitchener and Hamilton. Temperature there, both cases sitting at -1, just under the freezing mark. Have to look at the winds as well because they factor in, yes, there's a wind chill. You can knock a few more degrees off those temperatures I just showed you in terms of how it feels. But also we have the southwesterly flow. So that's helped to pick our temperatures up a little bit from where they've been. But it's also kind of turned the tables on things like some of the lake effects. So pushing things in this direction off of Lake Erie, down around Buffalo, seeing some snow there. That's kind of backing off a little bit, but still it's been in place and shifting things around towards Parry Sound, getting some of those squalls going in that direction. We're not dealing with that kind of activity through the overnight tonight, but I will let you know we could have a few flurries into tomorrow morning as those winds begin to shift towards the west and kind of turn things on their edge. And as we go into the afternoon, we might even see a little bit of a light mix just because that temperature is going to be above the freezing mark. After that, though, things are going to clear out and we'll get into some sunshine. Overnight tonight, -3. Tomorrow, some cloud cover. And again, it will be scattered, light in nature, but a little bit of precipitation into the afternoon. But hey, 2 degrees, Dwight. In terms of where the temps are going from here, I'll fill you in on those details coming up.
We love it when you keep it positive. Thank you, Colette.
Doing my best.
The city is feeling festive, and it's not just the recent snowfall. Some of the big Christmas displays were unveiled today. Greg Ross joins us from the unveiling of what promises to be the tallest Christmas tree in the city, but I don't even care about that. I want to know who's standing next to him right now. Is that who I think it is?
Yeah, that is U.S. Open champion Bianca Andreescu. Hey, that's a tall Christmas tree. You're looking really tall today and ready to be the host of this big event. Tell us what you're doing here today.
Well, CF Toronto Eden Center's goal is to just bring family and friends together here, lighting up the Christmas tree, kicking off the holiday season. So I'm super excited for that because I usually come every year when I'm in town.
Yeah,
so.
you said that. You really do come here all the time, but you got to admit, the crowds aren't always this big.
No, they're not.
A big crowd. I think they're here to see you.
No, I think they're here for the special guest. I'm not saying who though, but...
So you're teeing up that there is another special guest that's going to be here today?
Yeah, there is. And then there's electric violinists that are going to be performing too.
Is this a special guest that you've brought with you?
Oh, it was set up by everyone, but I definitely pitched in a little bit.
And you're not going to just give us a hint. Tell us who this could be.
Got to keep you guys on your toes a little bit.
All right. Well, we don't know who the special guest is going to be, but you know what, Bianca? I was all over the city today checking out just what people were doing to set up for Christmas, because today seems like it is the official start to the Christmas season, and we had an opportunity to see what people are doing.
The Christmas music could be heard echoing throughout the Distillery District today as vendors like Mary Muzak, who sells Christmas ornaments, frantically put the finishing touches on their displays.
Are you going to be ready for opening tonight?
Oh yes, of course. Yeah, have to be ready.
Hundreds of thousands of people are expected to visit the Christmas market over the next 6 weeks leading up to the big day, but it won't be quite as crowded as in previous years.
This year we're targeting less.
Creator Matthew Rosenblatt says during peak times on weekends, they're going to reduce capacity by about 10%. He says they're hoping it will create a better overall experience for visitors.
We're trying to get the most Christmas feeling and the best Christmas spirit. And the way to do that isn't more, it's more quality.
You have these old buildings, you got the old signs, and when you come in, it kind of feels like an old-time Christmas, doesn't it?
That is exactly what we're trying to do. So a little bit of Norman Rockwell mixed with a little bit of Dickinsonian Christmas, all here in urban Toronto.
While the market is a bit of a throwback, that wasn't the case across town.
Okay. 3, 2, 1.
The mayor helped unveil this year's Christmas display at the Bay, where some felt they may have strayed from tradition.
Very futuristic, very different than all the past years.
Victoria Hermenendildo and her mother come every year to see the windows at the Bay. And while it may have a new, modern look, it still gave them that same old feeling.
For me, when the bay windows come out, that to me is Christmas.
Yeah, and it'll be Christmas in here very soon. 6:45, they're going to light up that Christmas tree. You see the crowds here. I think a lot of them are here to see Bianca Andreescu. And I was pressing her to tell me who the special guest is going to be. A lot of people here guessing maybe Drake. She says it's not going to be Drake. I'll give you a hint. I'm pretty sure it's going to be a guy that wears a red suit. He's got a white beard, drives around in a sleigh. Dwight, does that sound familiar at all?
Yeah, I kind of think I know who that is, but I'm happy just that you got us Bianca, buddy. You don't even need to get me a Christmas present now. That was great. Thanks, Greg.
That's who I came to see.
What President Trump has done, the cover-up, makes what Nixon did look almost small.
Reaction after the first round of public hearings where the House of Representatives, will decide if Donald Trump will be impeached or not. We'll bring you the latest from Washington after the break. Democrats in the U.S. are gearing up for the next round of public hearings in the impeachment inquiry. It's the day after the first round of public hearings in the U.S. House of Representatives into whether the president should be impeached. And although for some the evidence is already clear, Donald Trump is dismissing the whole thing as a sham. Ellen Morrow has the story.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi used some of her strongest language yet to condemn the president's actions. She says they amount to bribery.
What President Trump has done on the record in terms of acting to advantage a foreign power to help him in his own election and of the obstruction of information about that, the cover-up, makes what Nixon did look almost small.
Yesterday, 2 career civil servants and current top U.S. officials on Ukraine policy testified that the Trump administration froze much-needed military aid to Ukraine in an effort to force it to launch investigations to try to dig up dirt on Joe Biden and his family. Acting Ambassador to Ukraine William Taylor said he sat in astonishment when he found out the aid was being withheld.
Withhold that assistance for no good reason other than help with a political campaign made no sense. It was illogical. It could not be explained. It was crazy.
Taylor also said one of his staffers overheard President Trump ask about the investigations on a phone call to Gordon Sondland, the U.S. ambassador to the European Union appointed by Donald Trump. The staffer told Taylor that Sondland said Trump cared more about investigating the Bidens than he did about Ukraine being a strategic ally in need. Today, the Associated Press is citing an unnamed source who says that a second staffer is backing up that account, which Democrats say is further proof the president was abusing his power for his own political gain. Republicans remain unswayed.
Nothing happened here. We're not going to impeach this president over this. We're not going to legitimize a hearing where you can only call Democratic witnesses. It's over. It's done for me.
The partisanship is set to get even more fraught with another public hearing on Capitol Hill tomorrow and more televised testimony scheduled for next week. Ellen Morrow, CBC News, Washington.
Benadryl or diphenhydramine is associated with drowsiness, but also other things like dry mouth, cognitive impairment, and also other risks associated with overdose.
It's been a staple in medicine cabinets for decades, but now a growing number of doctors are raising concerns about Benadryl. We'll bring you details coming up a little later in the show. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Are members of this community going to be able to have a say? Would these actually affect your average shopper? Do you pay your employees overtime?
What's your name?
Laura from CBC.
A new homeless shelter is getting ready to open its doors in the West End. It comes at a time when the city says the need for emergency shelters is higher than ever. Angelina King joins us live from their open house at St. Clair and Runnymede. And Angelina, as we said, this is a much-needed space.
Absolutely. We know right now there's a serious demand for emergency shelter space, and it's opening right in time for the cold weather. I'll get to that in some numbers shortly. I just want to tell you a little bit about this new shelter. So I am in one of the rooms, and as you can see, it is pet friendly and it's fully accessible. So this shelter is called Junction Place. There are 50 beds for men only. It includes things like programming, services, mental health and medical care and counseling, as well as things like showers and laundry for people who aren't staying in the shelter but could use those services. So there is an open house tonight for people in the community to come and check it out. The neighborhood did raise some concerns when this was proposed. One question being whether this is the right location for a homeless shelter to serve people that need the space. I asked the city about that. Take a listen.
We're looking at spreading shelters out across the city. People don't become homeless in the downtown area. They have to move downtown to receive services. So if you are living in this neighborhood and you become homeless and you have a job, but you have to go downtown to get your shelter, chances are your job may also become in jeopardy, which will make it that much harder for you to leave homelessness.
So the city says the demand for emergency shelter beds has never been greater than right now. So there are more than 7,100 shelter beds in the city of Toronto. Last night, when it was as cold as -14, those beds were at 93% capacity. Now, the number of beds can be broken down by shelters, co-ed shelters, and then shelters for men, women, youth, and families. So last night, the co-ed men, women, and youth shelters were at 98% capacity, while family shelters were at 100% capacity, and then family shelters in motels were at 83%. Now, earlier this week, the city released its winter plan for homelessness, and that included an additional 484 spaces, but these 50 beds here are not included in that number because existing clients will be moved to this shelter because Seton House is being vacated for the George Street revitalization. So this shelter here in the west end of Toronto opens on November 25th. Dwight?
Thank you, Angelina. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh laid out his priorities today to Justin Trudeau. The Prime Minister is holding one-on-one meetings with opposition leaders prior to Parliament resuming. Julie Van Duzen is in our parliamentary bureau. So, Julie, what can you tell us about the meeting?
Well, I mean, we're not allowed in the room except the cameraman to take a photograph. After that, we're kind of kicked out. So what we actually heard about it mostly came from Jagmeet Singh. But in the photo op, Trudeau was quite complimentary. They seemed quite friendly. He said we have a lot in common. You know, Jagmeet Singh has a long list of issues he's trying to push on this minority government. The same issues you heard in the campaign, more affordable housing, lower internet and cell phone fees, more compensation for First Nations children who were shortchanged by the welfare system. But, you know, we asked him, you got to hone it down because you can't get everything, right? So probably topping the list would be a national pharmacare program and public dental care. He said these were very popular in the campaign, and he really wants to see these items happen. And he said the Liberals have been talking about pharmacare for more than 20 years and doing nothing. And he says now's the time for Trudeau to actually do something. Take a listen.
I want to see some concrete action. I want to see some clear dates and some timelines. That, to me, would show a real commitment.
So, Julie, what kind of leverage, though, does Singh have to get Justin Trudeau to adopt some of his policies?
Well, I don't think he has as much as he thought he did. If you remember election night, Singh went from, you know, he lost 11 seats, I guess, or 13 seats, but he was dancing because the word on the street is that he'd have a lot of power in Ottawa, and he might, there's no doubt about it, but he is the leader of the fourth party. There are other parties. We saw yesterday that Trudeau was getting along quite well with the Bloc leader, Yves-François Blanchet. But Singh's point is, look, I'm the only national progressive leader. If you want a progressive agenda, he's going to have to turn to me. But, you know, he can go with other parties on a case-by-case basis. And even when you think of Blanchet, you know, he said, I think Trudeau could be in power for 4 years. So he's certainly not planning to trigger an election. Now, Singh didn't give an ultimatum, but he did say, look, if I don't get some, like a progressive agenda going here with this minority government, I'm not adverse to triggering an election if I can and going back to the people. Take a listen.
I know that they're going to have opportunities that they're going to need New Democrats to vote for a bill. I want to make it clear that that's not going to come for free. That's going to come with clear commitments to doing something that's going to benefit Canadians' lives.
But is the NDP in any shape to go back into a campaign right now?
I'm ready. I'm ready anytime.
I'm ready. So that's interesting since everyone says the NDP is broke. But anyway, so the political chest thumping, Dwight, has started, and all these parties are going to be pushing their agenda on a minority government. Of course, that's trying not to be defeated. And it all starts very soon, so we'll see how far they get before they have to hit the campaign trail again.
And we will check back with you, senior reporter Julie Van Duzen in our Parliamentary Bureau in Ottawa. Thank you, Julie.
You're welcome.
British Columbia has announced new rules on vape products. They include higher taxes and restrictions on sales and advertising, as well as limits on nicotine content and constraints on packaging.
We're going to use the power of treating nicotine as a health hazard as required to deal with the situation that has developed and to ensure that a new generation of young people is not addicted to nicotine.
The province is also cracking down on the vaping flavors, which seem to appeal to young people. Flavored products will only be sold in specific shops with age restrictions. The new rules are scheduled to begin next spring. The Canadian Pediatric Society is telling doctors to get familiar with alternative approaches to treating autism. With so much misinformation and pseudoscience out there, parents seeking help for their kids can be vulnerable to exploitation. As Vicatobia tells us, talking to a doctor may help them sort fact from fiction.
We're just going to do that.
When Christopher Lehman was diagnosed with autism as a child, his mother Sandra vowed to try any treatment that could help him speak. Treatments that sound scientific but aren't actually backed by mainstream science.
Here we have biocalibration electrodermal screening. What is that?
It was to bring his body into balance. So, whatever that meant at the time.
Then there was the chiropractor who said he could, in his words, correct autism.
He just kept saying, well, we need to go a little bit further. He's doing so well, let's just keep it going. It wouldn't have stopped had we not stopped it ourselves.
More than a year later, she'd spent more than $5,000.
It's desperation. It really is. Because there was no guidance before from anybody.
The Canadian Pediatric Society is trying to offer that guidance to doctors to better inform them about complementary and alternative autism treatments on the market, from low-risk interventions like vitamins and special diets to high-risk therapies such as chelation and hyperbaric oxygen treatments. The list doesn't include everything.
Hey, Nat. How are you? Good, thanks.
One of the authors, a leading autism researcher, says unproven therapies can be a drain on time, financial, and emotional resources. But doctors have to accept that won't stop parents from trying them.
We're not ultimately the gatekeepers for some of these treatments, and that their complementary alternative practices are often part of the approach to healthcare.
I would have liked to have them focus more on the risks towards the child.
This doctor says the new guidelines don't address the unknown long-term impact of all these alternative therapies on children. There's also the underlying question of why parents are driven to these unproven treatments and how mainstream medicine sometimes doesn't offer them a lot of hope.
We tend to focus a lot on the deficits, a lot on the issues. We don't always focus on strengths, and I think that that's something that needs to be always addressed.
What do you think?
As for Sandra Hart, she has no regrets trying alternative treatments. She says if she didn't, it would leave her wondering if she did everything possible to help her son. Vicadopia, CBC News, Innisfil, Ontario.
What do you want next?
It's hosted 10 Stanley Cup finals and the likes of Winston Churchill, Elvis Presley, and Muhammad Ali. A Toronto landmark is the topic of this week's Throwback Toronto, and we will show you coming up. And I am guessing, Colette, that you have already guessed what Toronto landmark that is, but don't give it away. We'll save it.
Okay.
But you have to give the forecast away.
That I am happy to provide for you at this moment. You don't even have to wait. We have it right here. A look, first of all, at the almanac. Really, what I want to point out here is not every detail. It's the fact that our average height this time of year is just over 7 degrees, and you know what it feels like out there and where it's been. So today, even that little bit of a warm-up, it actually put us closer to an average low for this time in November than where we actually went to. So the current temperatures there, at least not with a negative in front of it for the city anyway. Hamilton at -1, St. Catharines also 1. And you know what? You factor in the winds. You do have to pull a few numbers down again in terms of how it feels. But it's a southwesterly flow, so we can thank that. That's what helped to pick our temperatures up a little bit. It also, for areas that had been succumbing to the snow squalls, get a bit of a break because the winds have changed direction and some of those squalls have gone to other areas. Not saying you welcome them there, but that's what's happened. And what's going to happen again is that they're going to move tomorrow towards the west. So that shifts things once again. Now, we're likely going to see a little bit of cloud cover in the morning, maybe a few flurries down here towards the lower Great Lakes. You can see a little more flurry activity or a bit of a mix to the north of us, but that westerly flow will bring some squalls in, and some of those flurries will likely make their way into our skies into tomorrow in the afternoon. But because the temperature is going to be up a little above freezing, could be a little bit of a light mix. Should be somewhat scattered in nature, so not a big deal, but just to give you that awareness that that may happen. So I'm not really looking at accumulations there, but know it. And know that what happens after that is actually high pressure is going to build in. However, it's bringing some cold air from the north again, so another shot of some colder air. However, that's for Friday night into Saturday. We will have sunshine to accompany that, so at least it's going to be very bright, beautiful skies and feel good in that sense and look good. And we'll finally start to see things easing a little bit in the temperature story as we go Sunday into the beginning of next week. So a nice setup going into the weekend, just a bit cold, certainly on Saturday morning where that temperature is going to be in the minus double digits. But a look at overnight tonight. This isn't so bad in terms of our readings, -3 to -4. Now it will feel like about -10 tomorrow morning. Then into the afternoon, there we go, that little climb above seasonal, 2 degrees, not above seasonal, above freezing, 2-3 degrees for St. Catharines, a bit of mix, kind of scattered, especially into the afternoon hours. That cold night, Friday, Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon with the sunshine, -3. Still a little on the chilly side, Saturday night into Sunday. But Sunday, 1 degree with kind of a mix of sun and cloud for Santa and the parade going on. And then into Monday, Tuesday, we start to take those baby steps back up the ladder to some milder, slightly milder temperatures, Dwight.
Yeah, we just want some seasonal, call it. That's it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
It's been called Canada's Cathedral of Hockey. This week in 1931, Maple Leaf Gardens opened up in Toronto. Placed at the corner of Church and Carleton, it was built by Conn Smythe, the owner of the Toronto Maple Leafs. As it was during the Great Depression, banks were cautious about financing the build, but Smythe finessed construction workers to accept Maple Leaf Gardens stocks as 20% of their salary. It was built in just 6 months. Opening night at the Gardens saw the Leafs taking on the Chicago Blackhawks. While Toronto lost the first game 2-1, they did win the Stanley Cup that season. The Gardens would be the home of the Maple Leafs until 1999 when the Air Canada Centre opened up. Today, the site is home to the Mattamy Athletic Centre and a Loblaws. The antihistamine Benadryl has long been a staple in many medicine cabinets, but Canadian allergists are warning it has potentially dangerous side effects. They are especially concerned about giving it to children. Nicole Ireland explains.
Benadryl has decades of name recognition because it was actually introduced back in the 1940s, before current drug licensing standards were in place.
Just because it's the longest drug that's been in your medicine cabinet, the one that you recognize as having been there maybe since your parents or grandparents used it, does not mean it's the safest one.
The Canadian Society of Allergy and Clinical Immunology is urging people to stop automatically reaching for Benadryl for allergies, hay fever, and hives. Many people are familiar with the drowsiness associated with the medication, but allergists say parents don't realize the risk that can pose to their children. The sedation side effect means kids don't have a restful sleep, decreasing their cognitive function and ability to focus on school or sports. Children's breathing can be suppressed. A big danger is overdose, because it's easy to accidentally give them too much.
So there's no shade of gray here. We really know that this is a drug that has significant risk and almost no silver lining to make it the one that we would choose.
Allergists say Benadryl should not be so easily available and wants pharmacies to start keeping it behind the counter. That's an idea this Toronto pharmacist supports.
Basically what this is doing is forcing an intervention with the pharmacist. So it's still accessible. You don't actually need a prescription. It's just kept behind the counter. So if you do need it for whatever reason, you just need to have that discussion with the pharmacist to make sure it's appropriate for you and that you're aware of the risks.
Health Canada says it's reviewing the concerns. But in the meantime, allergists and pharmacists want people to know that there are other, safer options to relieve allergy symptoms. Nicole Ireland, CBC News, Toronto.
I'm really grateful and blessed for this opportunity, but I understand what I'm coming into.
I've been quoted as comparing Sonny to LeBron James.
One of the biggest names in rugby is coming to play for Toronto. We'll have all the details on Sonny Bill Williams coming right up.
A rugby superstar is bringing his talents to our city. Sonny Bill Williams is joining the Toronto Wolfpack. And while Williams is not well known outside the sport, his goal is to make rugby more visible. Lisa Shing has more.
If you're anything of a rugby fan, you'll know the name Sonny Bill Williams. A force on the field in different leagues and types of rugby and in the boxing ring. And today in the UK, the official announcement he's coming to play for the Toronto Wolfpack, a team that recently got promoted to the top-tier Super League.
I'm really grateful and blessed for this opportunity. What better, I guess, pressure environment would you want to test yourself?
That pressure environment he's talking about is because Toronto is already jam-packed with pro sports. Not only do we have the NBA champion Raptors, the Leafs and Blue Jays, there's Toronto FC and the Argonauts too. And rugby isn't as well known around here. For Williams, that's part of the appeal.
How amazing would it be if rugby league kicks off in North America?
Since 2017, the Toronto Wolfpack has been steadily making inroads, hoping to draw people in with a sport that's long been the craze of nations like England, Australia, and New Zealand, where Williams played with the legendary All Blacks, with whom he's won 2 World Cups.
If we can succeed, it's going to open up avenues for young Polynesian boys, young English lads. They could provide for themselves and their family in another country.
The Wolfpack's head coach is hoping to make use of Williams' star power.
So what Toronto are doing is making people around the world take note of Super League.
Those stands behind us were totally full.
This sports reporter has been following the rise of the Toronto Wolfpack since its inception 2 years ago and says interest in the sport is rapidly growing in the city, and adding Williams to the roster will elevate Toronto's name internationally.
You get that name, people are going to suddenly want to tune in at whatever time it is in their own countries to see Sonny Bill Williams play.
Williams will start the season with the Wolfpack in England early next year before coming to play on this field in April when it's warmer. Lisa Shing, CBC News, Toronto.
Welcome, Sonny. It's 2 things you wouldn't usually put together, pancakes and seafood, but a restaurant in the Junction is pairing the two, and it's become a delicious local favorite. Take a look.
It is a sloppy, messy pile of food, but it's delicious. My name's Victoria Bazan. I'm the owner of Honest Weight, located on Dundas Street West in the Junction. Honest Weight is a hybrid fish retailer and restaurant. We bring in a variety of fish and seafood products that we retail out of our case. People come into Honest Weight, what they can expect is to see for themselves the variety of foods that we're offering, both from retail and on the menu. People love our okonomiyaki. It's a Japanese savory pancake, very popular street food in Japan. So you start out with a pancake batter, and then you're kind of building it with layers. With cabbage, a variety of different fish products, egg, bacon. It's done on the flat top, stick it in the oven, and then it's topped off with the traditional garnishes, which is the Kewpie mayo, okonomi sauce, and then the scallions and shaved bonito flakes on top. Very savory, it's got the slight smokiness from the bonito. It's really not like anything else.
College Well, it promised you a slight warm-up, and today she delivered. Will it be the same for tomorrow? We'll check in one last time with her after the break. It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas everywhere we go. Yes, this is the iconic tree at the Eaton Center. It was lit up just minutes ago, measuring in at 108 feet. It's the tallest in the city. And earlier we heard Bianca Andreescu saying there would be a special guest. Well, there he is. Santa is in town making the rounds before Christmas. Today's tree lighting kicks off a series of nationwide events, with the next one in the GTA at Markville Mall tomorrow. That is a beautiful tree.
It's gorgeous.
Would not
I
fit
love
in
it.
our living rooms, but we can go to the Eaton Center and check it out. We got about 50 seconds to tell them what's up for tomorrow.
Well, I'll tell you what's up. We're going to be seeing that our temperatures are warming up a little bit. And by that, I just mean after a low tonight of -3, we're going to 2 degrees. But I think we're going to be happy about that, given where our temperatures have been. Just know that in the morning, we are still going to have that wind chill about -10 in terms of how it's going to feel. So we'll see some scattered flurries possibly in the morning, but more so into the afternoon. A very light mix is possible in a few parts of the GTA, just as those winds whip around to the west, and then that kind of moves through and clears out. We get a shot of cold air that comes back, Dwight, for Friday night and Saturday, and then we start our gentle warm-up.
Right, in time for the Santa Claus Parade.
Exactly.
Perfect timing. Have a great night, everybody. We'll see you back here tomorrow.